There's one thing wealthy people know that most don't. When someone is truly rich, they don't need to prove it to anyone. But what happens when a multimillionaire businessman walks into a luxury store wearing jeans and a t-shirt? The answer is shocking. This story is about how a simple misunderstanding changed an entire company's future, and why the biggest mistake you can make is judging someone by their appearance. Richard Martinez didn't look like a multimillionaire. That morning he left home wearing worn jeans and a simple t-shirt. He'd been building his tech company from nothing for 25 years, and he never cared about appearances. Why would he? His bank account spoke for itself. But on this Saturday morning, he had a simple matter to take care of. His wife's birthday was approaching, and he wanted to buy her a special gift, an exclusive Swiss watch that was only sold at one boutique in the city. The Prestige boutique stood in the city's most expensive district. This was the place where the local elite shopped. As Richard walked through the glass door, he immediately felt eyes on him. The security guard watched him suspiciously, and the salespeople looked at each other. Sarah, one of the salespeople, stepped closer to her colleague. "Look at that guy," she whispered. "He looks like he wandered in by mistake." Meanwhile, Richard calmly looked around the boutique. He'd known about this place for years, though he'd never been here personally. He knew his wife loved this brand, and he knew exactly which watch he wanted to buy. When he approached the watch section, one of the salespeople, James, finally walked over to him. "Excuse me, sir," he said in a somewhat condescending tone. "Can I help you with something?" Richard smiled. "Yes, I'd like to buy a watch from the Patek Philippe Complications series." James's eyes widened. This series started at $40,000. "Oh, well," he stammered. "This is quite an expensive collection. Are you sure that—" "Yes, I'm sure," Richard interrupted calmly. James felt uncomfortable. The man in front of him didn't look at all like someone who could spend such amounts on a watch. He made a decision. "You know what, sir? Maybe you should check out other stores too. Everything here costs tens of thousands of dollars, and I wouldn't want you to get into an uncomfortable situation." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable situation?" "Well, you know." James looked around, then continued louder so the other salespeople could hear. "This is a premium boutique. Maybe you'd find something at the mall that better fits your price range." The boutique fell silent. Every eye was fixed on Richard, who was still smiling. "I see," Richard said slowly. "So in your opinion, I don't look like someone who could afford these watches?" James puffed out his chest. "Well, honestly speaking, not really." Richard nodded. "All right. Then perhaps I could speak with the manager?" "The manager is busy right now," replied Sarah, who had stepped next to James. "But if you'd like, you can leave a message." "No, that's not necessary," Richard said, taking out his phone. "I'll just call the owner instead." The salespeople laughed loudly. "The owner?" James laughed. "Yeah, right. John Whitmore is a very busy man. I don't think he'd answer a random call." Richard dialed a number and waited. After a few seconds, someone picked up. "John, it's Richard," he said kindly. "I'm at your boutique right now and a little situation has developed." The boutique fell into thunderous silence. James's face went pale as Richard continued the conversation. "Yes, at the Prestige. Exactly. I wanted to buy a watch, but it seems your salespeople don't think I look rich enough for it." Richard waited for a moment, then laughed loudly. "Yes, I thought the same thing. Okay, thanks. You'll be here in 5 minutes." He hung up and put the phone back in his pocket. John Whitmore will be here in 5 minutes. In the meantime, perhaps I can wait. James could barely get the words out. You really know John Whitmore? For 25 years, Richard replied calmly. We were roommates in college. John Whitmore rushed into the boutique exactly 5 minutes later. He was a tall, elegant man who immediately hugged Richard. Richard, I haven't seen you in ages. Forgive me for the situation you encountered in my store. Then John looked around, and his gaze was devastating. James, Sarah, to my office. Right now. The salespeople went to the office with their heads down, while John turned back to Richard. Which watch did you want to see? Richard showed him which watch he wanted to buy. A beautiful Patek Philippe that cost $56,000. John personally brought out the piece and showed every detail. This will be perfect for Maria's birthday, Richard said, while admiring the watch. Would you wrap it for me? Of course, and Richard, you're a guest of the house. The watch is a gift. Richard shook his head. John, this is a $56,000 watch. I'll pay for it. No, my friend. This is the least I can do for how you were treated today. While John handled the wrapping, Richard looked around the boutique. It was a beautiful place, but he noticed something. The store was empty. Saturday morning, and there wasn't a single customer besides them. John, Richard spoke up. How's business? John sighed. If I want to be honest, not very well. We've been struggling since the pandemic. People shop online and fewer come in person. How bad is the situation? John hesitated, then decided to be honest with his old friend. Pretty bad. If we don't turn the trend around in the next 6 months, I'll have to close down. Richard thought about it. And your salespeople? Have they been working here long? James for 3 years, Sarah for 2 years. They're actually good. Just prejudiced, Richard finished. The next Monday morning, John woke up to an early phone call. It was Richard. John, I've been thinking about this. I have a proposal. I'm listening. Will you sell me the boutique? John listened in surprise. Are you serious? Completely. Send me the financial data, and I'll make my offer. By afternoon, Richard's lawyers had reviewed the documents. That evening, Richard called John. $2 million, cash. The transaction can happen tomorrow. John couldn't believe his ears. Richard, this is incredible. But are you sure? Completely. However, I have one condition. What's that? James and Sarah submit their resignations today. I won't work with people who judge others based on appearance. On Tuesday, James and Sarah came to work, still feeling uncomfortable about Saturday's incident. John called everyone together for a meeting. Last night I sold the boutique, John announced. Everyone was shocked. To whom? Asked Sarah. To Richard Martinez, the man you served so nicely on Saturday. James's mouth fell open. He bought the entire boutique? The entire building, John corrected. And his first instruction was for both of you to resign. Sarah started crying. But John, this can't be serious. It was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, interrupted a voice from the door. Richard walked in, now wearing a suit and tie. He looked completely different. You lost your jobs because you thought you could judge people based on their appearance. This is a luxury store where service quality matters, and you failed the simplest test. Richard looked around the boutique. I'm going to transform this place. It will be a place where every customer is treated with respect, regardless of how they look. John watched his old friend curiously. What are you planning? First, new staff. I'm going to hire salespeople who understand that luxury isn't about excluding people, but about making every customer feel special. Richard walked to the large window overlooking the street. Second, I'm going to change the boutique's culture. No more prejudice, no more rejection based on appearance. You know, Richard continued while still looking at the street, this isn't the first time I've been in this situation. In my youth, when I was still building my company, I was judged countless times based on my appearance. He turned and looked at John. Do you remember our college years? I wore jeans and t-shirts then too, but my clothes never determined who I was. Yes, I remember, John said. Even then, we knew you were destined for great things. The difference is that you never judged me based on my appearance. That's why we've remained friends for 25 years. Richard sat down in one of the armchairs. I learned in business that true value comes from within. A company doesn't become successful because of how beautiful its office is or how expensive its logo is. It becomes successful by the value it creates. And this boutique? John asked. This boutique will now create value like they've never seen before. Every customer will leave here feeling special, not because they bought expensive things, but because they were treated as human beings. If you're curious about how Richard built his tech empire from nothing and what other surprising twists this story holds, then stay with me. But first, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because we bring inspiring stories every week that can change your perspective on success. The real power of Richard's story doesn't lie in buying the boutique. The deeper message is much more important. In the modern world, we tend to immediately judge people based on their appearance. But let's think about it. How many opportunities do we miss because we draw conclusions too quickly? How many potential business partners, friends, or customers do we reject because they don't meet our expectations? Richard's case perfectly demonstrates this problem. A multimillionaire businessman who spent 25 years building a tech empire, yet was treated like a beggar just because he wore jeans and a t-shirt. This story goes beyond a simple boutique incident. It reflects a deeper social problem. In modern societies, we often determine people's status based on appearances. But what about those who consciously choose simplicity? What about those who don't feel the need to flaunt their wealth? Richard Martinez was exactly that kind of person. This is actually a well-known phenomenon among tech industry workers. Just think of Mark Zuckerberg, who almost always appears in the same gray t-shirt, or Steve Jobs, who wore the same black turtleneck and jeans for years. Richard's decision to buy the boutique wasn't revenge. He meant it as a lesson. He showed that real power doesn't lie in shouting or threatening. Real power lies in being able to act. When James and Sarah looked down on him, Richard didn't yell or threaten. He simply picked up the phone and solved the problem. This is the difference between truly successful people and average people. Truly successful people don't waste their time convincing people that they're successful. Instead, they prove it with actions. James and Sarah's reaction was typical. When they found out who they had rejected, they tried to find excuses. But Richard made it clear that there's no excuse for prejudice. This wasn't a mistake, he told them. This is a character issue, and your character failed the test. This attitude might seem cruel, but it's actually an important lesson. People working in the service industry have a responsibility to treat every customer with equal respect. Richard's vision for the boutique was more than a business decision. It was a social mission. He wanted to create a place where no one would be judged based on their appearance. Every person deserves respect, he told his new employees at the first meeting. It doesn't matter if they wear jeans or an Armani suit. Our job is to provide the same excellent service to everyone. This principle soon bore fruit. The boutique's reputation began to spread throughout the city. People talked about how they were treated differently here. Interestingly, Richard's decision affected not only the boutique, but the entire luxury retail sector in the city. Other stores also began to rethink their service philosophy. A local jewelry store owner said later, "Richard's story prompted us to reconsider how we treat customers. We realized we had made mistakes too." This shows how one person's decision can trigger a chain reaction. Richard didn't just buy a boutique, he forced an entire industry to self-examine. For Richard, this whole story wasn't about money. He was already long past the point where buying a boutique would affect him financially. This was about satisfaction. "It's not about revenge," he explained later in an interview. "It's about proving that our character is more important than our appearance." This mentality distinguishes truly successful people from those chasing money. Richard had long since learned that money is just a tool, not a goal. Months after the incident, the prestige boutique was completely transformed. The new staff worked with a different mindset, and this was reflected in the results. The store's revenue increased by 30% in the first quarter. More importantly, however, customer satisfaction rose from the previous 50% to over 90%. "The difference is simple," said the new manager. "Now we focus on making every customer feel good, not on judging them." James and Sarah's story didn't end with their resignations. Both learned from their mistake, though they took different paths. James entered a training program where he learned how to handle customers without prejudice. After 6 months, he got a job at another luxury boutique where he applied what he had learned. Sarah had a harder time processing the incident. She struggled for months to find work because word had spread around the city. Eventually, she found employment at a non-profit organization working with disadvantaged youth. "This incident changed my life," Sarah said later. "I realized what damage prejudices cause, and now I work to teach others about this." Richard's story shows that everything can change in an instant. James and Sarah lost their jobs because of one bad decision. Richard bought an entire store because of one bad experience. But the most important lesson is that every interaction matters. We never know who we're dealing with. The person we look down on today might be our boss tomorrow. "Every person we meet is fighting some battle we know nothing about," Richard said. "The least we can do is approach them with kindness." This story also shows that money's real power doesn't lie in what we can buy. Money's real power lies in how we can use it to achieve change. Richard didn't buy the boutique to show how rich he was. He bought it to send a message. Human dignity is worth more than any amount of money. "Wealth comes with responsibility," Richard said. "If I have the opportunity to create change, then I must do it." Today, the Prestige Boutique is one of the city's most successful luxury stores. Richard didn't just buy it. He completely transformed its culture. The new management philosophy is simple. Every customer is equally important. It doesn't matter how much money they spend or how they look. Everyone is served with the same respect and attention. This philosophy is not only ethically correct, but also business successful. The store's profit doubled in the first year and has continued to grow ever since. For Richard, this entire experience was also a learning process. Although he was the winner in this situation, he also learned a lot from it. "I realized that even negative experiences can give valuable lessons," he said. "This incident confirmed that I'm on the right path in life." This attitude is characteristic of successful people. They don't fear problems. Instead, They see opportunities in them for growth and change. Richard Martinez's story didn't end with buying the boutique. 3 months later, he received an unexpected phone call. It was James on the other end of the line. "Mr. Martinez, this is James. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I want to thank you." Richard listened in surprise. "Your lesson changed my life. Now I see people differently, and I have a question. I'm listening. Would there be room in your new boutique for someone who has learned from his mistake?" Richard thought for a moment. Then he slowly smiled. "I expect you in my office tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. But James..." "Yes, sir. This time, don't judge me by my clothes." And you know what? Richard hired James because he believed that people are capable of change. But what happened next between James and Richard? Well, that's a story for another time.